Last year, we brought you the all-new Trek Fuel EXe, streamlined, seductive, and sub 20 kilos. It featured the fantastic new TQ motor at its core, a silhouette which was barely any different to an MTB and said to herald the beginning of new mid-power EMTBs. However, it was £13,500. Would I buy a bike at that money? Absolutely not. I'd buy one of these, the alloy version of the Fuel EXe, at roughly half the price, but with all the same system goodies. The question is though, is it half the bike? To answer that question does require me to spend some quality time on both bikes. Yes, I know what you're going to say. So let's rewind. It's almost a year and a day since Trek launched the original carbon Fuel EXe, and it appears many of you really like it. A trail bike which, with a TQ motor, takes the sting out of the climbs, allowing you to absolutely murder the descents and your wallet. This bike is everything the top-end bike is in terms of shape and e-bike system. And then again, it isn't. No one-piece plastic bars or plastic wheels, no plastic frame, no electronic gears that shift the same speed as manual ones. Is this still a superbike? And why buy a bike at twice the money? I don't know. Okay, does it go up, down, along and across at the same speed, given its carbon poverty? Right, there are 3 new alloy versions in the Fuel EXe range, beginning at around about £5,000, but we'll be using the XT version in this video as a comparison. Now, all the important bits that make the carbon Fuel EXe such an awesome bike are still at the heart of the new alloy version. The e-bike system, the geometry, the everyday MTB of what we previously said was the future, now made even more affordable. Right, so the system parts. First of all, the tiny but mighty TQ motor from the boffins out in Munich. Now, Trek were the first to use the TQ motor, but as many of you know, many have followed in their footsteps. Secondly is the battery. We've got a 360 watt-hour battery in the down tube with the option of having a 160 watt-hour range extender. But so compact, I think, is that 360. I'd probably opt for 2 of those instead. Moving up to the top tube, we've got a very neatly integrated display there, and arguably one of the neatest remotes in the business. You have the app for all the metrics you could ever imagine. Things such as motor tuning, planning your ride, and also analysing your ride. Then, of course, we have the very sophisticated suspension kinematic and, of course, the shock tune, developed in Los Angeles by Jose Gonzalez and his team. Now, if you want to go and ride rocks, go and see Jose. And last but not least, the angles, the exact same geometry as featured on the plastic bike. Okay folks, that's the angles and e-bike system things covered. Now time to turn on to the material. Now let's get something very straight. Just because this bike is made of alloy does not mean for 1 second that there will be a drop in performance. Trek are very much pioneers in carbon fibre manufacture and process, but also they know how to get a good flex to stiffness balance out of aluminium as well. Now we're talking weights. Remember, it depends on what model you're getting of the bike. Remember, the carbon bike was around about 19 kilos, the aluminium bike around about 20. Remember, those numbers can change with such things as your tyre choice or your pedal choice. I mean, you could, if you wanted to, strip the paint off this bike to save a bit more weight again. Now, there's a thought. But more than the weight, I think it's the way this bike fizzes across the ground. I'd go so far as to say I might actually prefer it to the carbon bike. Right, shape and purpose. What's this bike all about? Well, 140 rear, 150 front, 29-inch wheels. You might have seen on the carbon fibre bike, we went on some big adventures in the mountains. You can do all of that on this bike, but I would say the soul of the Fuel EXe is all about trails such as that. Wow. This bike is an absolute flying machine through technical single track such as this. And I love the fact that you get over 25k, there's no resistance at all. Oh, this bike is a flying machine. I definitely feel there's more compliance on this bike with the aluminium handlebar wheels and frame compared to the one with carbon equivalent to those parts. You could say that the carbon bike will be a bit tighter, but at the end of the day, there's a human element to riding mountain bikes. So you've still got to have the legs and the lungs to get these bikes moving. Such a good feel to this bike. And I'd actually go so far as to say that if I was given the choice between this bike at 6,000 or the carbon bike, rocks coming up, whoa, or the carbon bike at 13.5, I'd actually go for this. And that's because I think this bike will just give you that edge in terms of grip. Regardless of that, this bike handles like a dream. It's a proper trail bike. I think many people are now switching to the lightweight mid-assist e-mountain bike for several reasons. Things such as the silhouette, which is like an MTB, and possibly that TQ motor, which makes very little noise whilst out on the trail. Now, I get daily reminders of why I'm not talking about motor gearbox bikes, and I think for a lot of people, they like to have a lightweight bike which they can throw around. So if you think about that e-bike system, which I mentioned a minute ago. Now, the e-bike system is the remote, the display, the battery, all the gubbins inside as well, plus, of course, the motor. Now, a lot of combined motor gearbox units on the market, around about 4.2 kilos. The system weight on this is 3.9 kilos, so it's already lighter. And for many people, that's a really engaging proposition. I wanted to give you guys an insight into the sound of the TQ motor. Oh, all I can hear is the pedals on Louis' bike. Hey, listen, there's a harmonic pin ring design to the TQ motor, which means there's no gears or belts on the bike. Instant engagement when you're riding it, and a really natural ride feel. And TQ say because there's no cogs or gears, that means there's no friction, there's no wear, and no potential failure in the system. A few details for you on the battery side of things. Now, as I mentioned, there's a 360 watt hour in the down tube, and a 160 watt hour range extender. Now, both are easily dismountable, but the weights of those, you're looking at 1.8 kilo for the down tube mounted battery and 900 grams for the range extender. So I'm thinking, as I mentioned earlier, why not have two of those down tube mounted batteries? Because I said, very easy to dismount if you're charging in a hotel room or traveling. Actually, on the subject of traveling, you can actually travel with that 160 watt hour battery, which is quite a rarity in the EMTB world. One other thing, which I haven't mentioned so far, is there's very little or hardly any drag in the system on that TQ motor. So you could actually ride home with no battery if you wanted to. Not that I encourage you to do that. It's going to run you through the front of house functions on the Fuel EXe. Now, first of all, for those of you who are not familiar with the remote, there's a really nice rubberized feel to it. It's super stealth. It's got walk mode, which I mentioned before. You can disconnect the remote. You can have it to the right-hand side of your brake lever or to the left, or you can actually have it on the right-hand side. In terms of the display, now there's a weight-based range on the display, which shows you just how much time you've got in each of the modes. So for example, at the moment, like a 32% battery left, 1 hour 34 in eco mode, then you go into the mid mode, I've got 1 hour 19, and then in full power, 32 minutes. So as I said, weight-based range, very cool feature on this bike. Now, when it comes to the app, you can fully customize the outputs of your motor. You can see any updates which you need to your battery or your motor. And also you can check your balance because it'll obviously be intact because you bought the alloy bike. So the bottom line in response to the question which I posed earlier in this video, is this bike half the bike of the top end £13,500 version? No, it's not. But more than that, is this actually a lesser bike than the top-end bike? And I think absolutely not is the answer to that question as well. Now, this bike is going to come in 3 different versions. You've got the 5, which comes in at £5175. This is the Fuel EXe XT version, 5475. And then you've got the EXe T-type bike, which is just over £7,000. Folks, I really like this bike. I really like the feel to aluminium. You've got aluminium wheels, you've got the aluminium bar and stem, which people would prefer over the one-piece carbon version. You've got XT brakes, full aluminium chassis, and I think with the shock absorber and the fork on that bike, they've got a really, really good flex to stiffness balance. Guys, get yourselves out on the EXe, compare them. Compare the carbon version versus the alloy version, and let us know in the comments, and we'll see you next time.